She embarrassed her black mother at her wedding. But what followed changed everything. No one remembered who dropped their glass first. Only the sound it made when it shattered. That was the moment the room fell silent. Under the chandeliers of Atlanta's grandest hotel, the bride stood frozen, her face pale against the shimmer of her gown. Around her, guests whispered in disbelief. Somewhere in that circle of diamonds and champagne, a mother stood trembling, her gift lying broken at her feet. The music had stopped. The cameras hung mid-air. And in the center of it all, Naomi Carter realized she had just crossed a line she could never step back from. Her white glove still tingled from the sting. Her mother's cheek glowed faintly red beneath the ballroom lights, a color that hurt more than any word could. Did she just... Someone whispered near the dessert table. Another voice cut in. Her own mother. The disbelief spread like wildfire. Every head turned. Every breath held. Evelyn Carter, dressed in her Sunday best, didn't speak. She simply looked at her daughter with eyes that had carried decades of struggle, the eyes of a woman who had worked 2 jobs, scrubbed other people's floors, and raised a daughter to rise above it all. And now that same daughter had struck her in front of everyone. The gift Evelyn had brought, a small brown paper box tied carefully with ribbon, lay cracked open. From it, a silver locket glimmered faintly under the chandelier light, the last keepsake of a life Naomi had tried so hard to bury. Around them, the wealthy murmured in confusion, unsure whether to comfort or retreat. The bride's new family watched in horrified silence, their polite smiles faltering. That was the moment the entire room learned something money couldn't buy: grace. And before anyone spoke again, Naomi realized this wasn't just a scene at a wedding. This was a reckoning. Her past had found its way back into her perfect life, and it had come wearing her mother's face. Hours before the chaos, the city of Atlanta woke up painted in gold. The Coraline Grand Hotel gleamed like something out of a movie, crystal chandeliers glistening, florists rushing through marble halls, a string quartet rehearsing near the ballroom doors. Everything had to be perfect. Naomi Carter's wedding wasn't just an event. It was a statement. The daughter of a black single mother was marrying into one of Georgia's oldest white families, a family with money, influence, and generations of power behind their last name. The press had already called it a modern Southern fairy tale. Naomi stood before her mirror, her reflection glowing in silk and diamonds. But beneath the surface shimmer, her chest felt tight. She'd worked all her life to belong in rooms like this, spaces where people smiled at her success, but still whispered when she walked away. Her makeup artist complimented her beauty, but the compliment came laced with a quiet surprise. You're stunning. You don't even look like you came from the South Side. Naomi smiled politely, the same smile she'd learned to wear when people meant well, but said too much. Down the hall, her mother Evelyn, the black mother, was arriving late, not by choice, but because her Uber driver had dropped her blocks away, saying the hotel wasn't for locals like her. She'd walked the rest of the way in her modest lavender dress, clutching the brown paper-wrapped box to her chest. Inside it lay a silver locket and a note she'd written by hand. For your new beginning, love always, Mom. When she entered the glittering ballroom, eyes turned, not with admiration, but judgment. Her shoes were simple, her dress old-fashioned, her hands worn from years of cleaning houses. Yet her smile was pure, her pride glowing brighter than any diamond in that room. Naomi saw her mother and felt 2 worlds collide, love and embarrassment, pride and shame. Evelyn waved softly, but Naomi only nodded, quickly turning back toward her bridesmaids. From that moment, the air changed. No one said it aloud, but the difference between welcome guest and unwanted reminder was written in every glance that followed Evelyn across the room. The music began like a dream. White petals floated across the aisle as violins filled the air with soft gold. Every seat was taken, every head turned as Naomi appeared, glowing in her gown, the image of success, the promise of something greater. Cameras clicked, flashes bursting like fireworks. But as she walked, her gaze flickered toward the back rows, where her mother sat, not in the front, not with the family, but near the exit. Evelyn's hands folded neatly in her lap, the brown paper gift resting beside her. She smiled, proud and small, as if she didn't notice the empty seats left between her and the others. The planner had mistakenly seated her there, calling it a better view. No one questioned it, and no one offered to move. Naomi swallowed hard. For a heartbeat, she wanted to stop, to fix it. But the cameras, the eyes, the perfect life she'd built, they all pressed her forward. As the officiant spoke, she repeated her vows through trembling lips. Each word about honor and love felt heavy, like promises she couldn't fully keep. And every time she glanced toward Evelyn, she saw memories. Her mother's tired hands ironing school uniforms, the late nights whispering encouragement before exams, the sacrifices she'd made without ever complaining. But those memories clashed with the murmurs drifting from the guests. Who's that woman in the back? She doesn't look like she belongs with the groom's family. Is she from the bride's side? The laughter that followed was quiet, but Naomi heard every note. The ceremony ended in applause, a standing ovation for the picture-perfect couple. Naomi smiled for the cameras, the way she'd practiced, but the joy in her chest was gone. As the guests rose to leave, Evelyn remained seated for a moment longer, whispering a prayer. Then she reached for the small box beside her, holding it close as if it were a shield. Up front, Naomi felt her stomach twist. The world saw a radiant bride. But inside, she was a little girl again, ashamed of the woman who had given her everything. And somewhere deep down, she knew that kind of shame always demanded a price. The reception glittered like a movie scene. Crystal glasses chimed, laughter shimmered off the chandeliers, and the air smelled of champagne and roses. Every corner of the ballroom sparkled, except the one where Evelyn Carter stood, quietly near the buffet table, unsure where to stand, unsure where she fit. She watched her daughter move through the crowd, glowing, gracious, perfect. Naomi smiled at everyone, the executives, the politicians, the family of her new husband. Her laugh was effortless, her posture flawless. Only someone who'd known her since birth would notice the stiffness in her shoulders, the tension behind that smile. Evelyn's heart swelled with pride, yet there was a loneliness in her chest that wouldn't fade. She'd imagined this day for years, walking her daughter down the aisle, hugging her in joy. But no one had asked her to give a toast. No one had even offered her a chair near the family table. Still, she stayed, because that's what mothers do. Finally, she gathered her courage and stepped toward Naomi. Her hands trembled slightly, the small box held carefully, like something sacred. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "I wanted to give you this before the night's over." Naomi froze. Her husband's mother was watching. So were the guests. A hush fell near their table as Evelyn offered the modestly wrapped gift, brown paper against crystal linen. Someone near the bar snickered. "Not now, Mom," Naomi whispered, forcing a smile through clenched teeth. "We'll do it later, okay?" But Evelyn only smiled, unaware of the panic in her daughter's eyes. "It's just something small. From your father and me." Naomi's face flushed. The cameras, the murmurs, the curious glances, they closed in like a storm. Pride surged before empathy could catch it. "Mom, please." "Not here." When Evelyn reached out again, trying to place the gift in her hand, Naomi's instinct snapped. Her hand moved faster than thought. A sharp sound, a sudden gasp. The ballroom froze. The box hit the floor. The ribbon loosened, and from the paper spilled a silver locket, catching the light, glinting like truth itself. Evelyn stared down at it, then at her daughter. "You forgot where you came from," she whispered, voice trembling but unbroken. Naomi's hand still hung mid her heart shattering with the echo. That was the moment pride became her cage, and love became the key she'd thrown away. No one spoke. Even the band stood frozen mid-song, their instruments still humming in the air. The scent of roses mixed with something colder, disbelief. The guests shifted awkwardly, pretending to check their phones, pretending not to stare. But every pair of eyes in that ballroom had already witnessed it, a bride's hand against her mother's cheek. Evelyn slowly bent down, her knees trembling as she reached for the broken box. The paper was torn, the ribbon stained with wine. Inside, the silver locket gleamed under the soft golden light. When she opened it, 2 tiny photographs stared back. Baby Naomi, wrapped in a blanket, and a man in uniform smiling with quiet pride. Her father. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt. Naomi's breath caught. She had never seen that picture before. On the inside of the locket, etched so faintly it was almost invisible, were the words, "For our daughter's big day." "Love, Dad?" Evelyn's fingers brushed the engraving. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "I prayed for this day your whole life, baby. But I didn't know success would cost me my daughter." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The groom's father stepped forward, his tone clipped, polite, and heavy with coded disapproval. "Perhaps we should keep family matters private," he said, looking at Evelyn the way one might at a servant who had overstayed her welcome. Evelyn met his gaze, unflinching. Then she turned back to Naomi, the same girl she had carried through every storm. "Don't let their world make you forget ours," she said softly. "Because when their doors close, home is where you'll want to run." Naomi couldn't speak. Her throat tightened, her body still trembling. Every whisper, every side glance, every forced smile she'd practiced, it all crumbled beneath the weight of that truth. By midnight, the ballroom was empty. The flowers wilted, the lights dimmed, and Naomi sat alone at the edge of the dance floor. Her mascara streaked, her gown wrinkled, her soul hollow. The silver locket lay under a table, faintly glinting, the only thing in the room still shining. In that silence, she finally understood. You can't build a life on shame and expect it to stand. Days turned into weeks. The headlines faded, the glamour vanished, and the perfect images from that wedding, the smiles, the applause, the gold, became ghosts Naomi couldn't bear to look at. Her husband had grown distant, his family colder than the marble floors they walked on. Conversations were short, polite, and heavy with quiet judgment. They didn't say it aloud, but Naomi could feel it in every glance. "You embarrassed us." But the real shame wasn't theirs to carry. It lived in Naomi's chest like a stone. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her mother's face, the shock, the heartbreak, and worst of all, the silence that followed. One night, she finally broke. She left the ring on the dresser, grabbed her coat, and drove back to the neighborhood she hadn't visited in years. The same cracked sidewalks, the same flickering streetlights, the same apartment that had once been her entire world. When she knocked, the door opened slowly. Evelyn stood there, smaller somehow, her eyes tired but calm. Naomi's words tangled in her throat. "Mama, I'm sorry." "For everything." Evelyn didn't answer right away. She studied her daughter, the makeup still smudged, the pride finally stripped away. Then, in that same quiet voice that had carried her through every hard year, she said, "You looked beautiful that day." It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't rejection either. She stepped aside, leaving the door open just enough for light to spill through. Naomi didn't walk in. She couldn't, not yet. Instead, she reached into her pocket and placed the silver locket on the doorstep, polished, whole again. "This belongs home," she whispered. As she turned to leave, the morning sun began to rise. The same light that had once crowned her wedding now warmed her mother's doorstep. Naomi realized then that success meant nothing if it came at the cost of her roots. She'd spent years trying to fit into a world that never truly saw her. Not her skin, not her story, not her strength. And in that search for belonging, she had forgotten the one person who had loved her long before anyone else ever did. If you've ever felt that pressure, to fit in, to prove yourself, to hide where you come from, remember this. Pride fades, power shifts. But love, especially a mother's love, is the one thing that never asks you to earn it. What would you have done if you were Naomi? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that reveal the truth behind the shine.